38 days to get Donald Trump out of our lives for good. I'm Jessica Denson, and this is Lights On. So, what are you doing about it? This is the time, and there is nothing you can do to get it back. So please, please, please join me in seizing this moment and taking your place in American history. Do something, as Michelle Obama so perfectly said. Judge Chutkan and Jack Smith are doing something, thank God, in spite of the tyranny-prone, corrupt justices on our Supreme Court. We talked a few weeks ago about how an evidence dump that was coming due at the end of this month, and the special counsel delivered yesterday in a massive 180-page sealed filing that makes his case for why Donald Trump is not immune from criminal prosecution. Jack Smith wants the redacted filing filled with never-before-seen evidence from witnesses like Mike Pence and Mark Meadows released to the public. And just today, Judge Chutkan set a briefing schedule that orders the parties to finish their briefing on desired redactions by October 10th. Now, Donald Trump no doubt wants everything under wraps, and he's already pushing out delirious counter-programming about what was really happening when he led a deadly insurrection to stay in power against the will of the American people. But Judge Chutkan, who has made clear that politics or this election is not a consideration in her rulings, could unseal parts of the filing as soon as mid-October, of course, before the election. So keep your eye out for that. Now, there's been a lot of attention this week on New York Mayor Eric Adams, who was just charged in a sprawling federal indictment on charges ranging from bribery to wire fraud. Gotta be honest, no surprise on my end. I think this is somebody who has reveled in just making a party of his mayorship from day one. And it's a shame we don't have someone like Maya Wiley as the mayor of New York City. But anyway, it's no surprise that Donald Trump took a sympathetic tone when asked about the charges against Mayor Adams and claimed that they are both victims. They're just both victims, of course. These people have taken advantage of so many other people are victims of political persecutions. Well, that's a lie, of course, and also such a ironic point that he would bring that out when a Justice Department has gone after so many Democrats. Mayor Adams, of course, is a Democrat. There are many other Democrats that this Democratic administration and Justice Department, which obviously operates outside of the realm of politics in a normal administration like the Biden administration, has gone after. But there are things that Eric Adams and Donald Trump have in common. And I couldn't stop thinking this week about the bribery investigation of the $10 million that Donald Trump likely received from Egypt, an investigation that was shut down by Bill Barr and otherwise would have likely resulted in a sprawling foreign influence indictment of its own. I mean, this is one of those things, one of those massive scandals that was just brushed under the rug. The way you have to view this is that Bill Barr was Donald Trump's henchman in the first administration where there were some guardrails, and he was already doing these horrific things like shutting down investigations into potential massive crimes committed by the sitting president. Can you imagine what would happen in a second administration when all the guardrails are off? So a warning sign for us, a story that we should be paying attention to, and we're going to keep paying attention to it today. We're not going to turn the lights off, or the lights should be continuously on. And there's another thing that I always think back to as a case where Donald Trump should have also been charged, or at least in the impeachment context, charged with bribery and extortion. And that was in Impeachment 1. I know that it was very good that an impeachment was brought at all, and they brought it for a quote unquote abuse of power. I had wished at the time they brought it for bribery and extortion, which is what Donald Trump was doing to the president of Ukraine. And I know we have made progress. Thank God we have made progress on accountability for Donald Trump. And sealing his defeat in November will ensure that we actually get to see the fruits of that progress and make sure that that accountability has a hold and there are consequences. But thus far, the impunity, the lack of consequences has dire consequences for our country and for the world. And you don't have to look any further than President Zelenskyy, who was forced shamefully. I think it's such a shameful construct that Donald Trump is even allowed to run for president. The fact that the Supreme Court, the Republican Party, and the media in so many cases has so utterly betrayed this country and allowed this man to be a mainstream political figure. And because of it, someone like President Zelenskyy was forced this week to meet with Donald Trump in the off chance that Donald Trump gets elected again and he has to deal with this Putin friend and apologist in saving his country from the attacks that they are subject to. So he has to meet with Donald Trump. You've got the split screen this week with Donald Trump going on the attack against Ukraine, praising Vladimir Putin as he does, suggesting that Zelenskyy should take a quote unquote deal, which of course is surrender. And on the flip side, you've got Kamala Harris very clearly laying out what that surrender is, and that is not something that the United States can stand for at all. It's a dangerous, dangerous prospect. But these are the consequences. These are the consequences, and they are so dire. So it's all on us. It's all on us with a little help, thank God, from the people in power in our justice system, like Judge Chutkan, like good prosecutors like Jack Smith, who have taken a terrible hand they've been dealt with. These are advocates for the public welfare. Donald Trump committed crimes against all of us, and they are standing up for us in spite of these abysmal, disgusting rulings from the Supreme Court. Other than that, it's all on us. It's all on us. So I've got some things, few things under wraps that I'm working on in a very short time frame right now. I really hope that you join me in understanding the seriousness of this moment and how we can never get this moment back. I know we all have times in our lives when we look back on things and on times and opportunities and wish that we had seized them. It's all in front of us right now. Let's not miss this opportunity. Let's do everything in our power in these next 38 days and win this election for Kamala Harris and the Democrats up and down the ballot to deprive this corrupt and fascist Republican Party from taking power in this country and rolling back centuries of freedom that so many people have suffered and died for. We can do it. Let's do it. Don't let the opportunity be lost on us. Welcome again to a live episode of Lights On. You've got me for the hour, and we're going to go through all those stories and more. I've got a couple, other interesting tidbits that we're going to squeeze in this hour that I really want to shine a light on and expose the hypocrisy and just the lies that are out there and how we can all overcome them. It's just ridiculous and disgusting that we are continuously force-fed this picture that is not correct about the choices that we face. And we shouldn't have this ambiguity. We should be crystal clear. All of us, all Americans should. So we're going to shine a light on all of those things today. Let's start with the special counsel. As I mentioned in the opening, in their filing Friday, Jack Smith's prosecutors argued that releasing a version of the brief that removes the names of witnesses other than Vice President Mike Pence would respect the court's order and serve the public's interests. So he's basically saying if this does come out in mid-October, which would be wonderful, there will be probably significant redactions, a lot of names withheld. And Jack Smith is making the case that he would be fine with all of those names being redacted other than Mike Pence. Now, you better believe there will be plenty of reporters, and we will do it here, plenty of people combing through that filing and being able likely to identify who redacted names are just based on the context of this evidence. What you're going to be looking for is witness interviews, grand jury testimony, summaries of information obtained from search warrants. And this could shed a lot of new light on really conversations with people like Mark Meadows and Donald Trump, those very intimate conversations of people who had firsthand knowledge of Donald Trump's actual behavior in the lead up and on January 6th. This is going to expound likely on the extraordinary work of the January 6th committee, all of the things that they revealed about how he was sitting back watching television as a mob ransacked the Capitol, as he's trying to deflect this week by saying that other people did not call in 10,000 National Guard troops that he wanted called in. Well, he was the president. He had the ability to order in the National Guard troops, not Nancy Pelosi, not a mayor of DC, not anybody else. That was in his power. He, of course, did not do it because why? Because it was his insurrection. He led them there in the first place. I mean, the deflection here is so rich. They really do take people for fools for buying into any of their revisionist history on this. I think I said a few weeks ago that any woman still voting for Trump should have some self-respect. Really, anybody, please, out there, if you got any friends or family that are still voting for him or considering voting for him, just maybe ask them to love themselves, have a little self-respect, to not be listening to the obscene, deflective, abusive, gaslighting lies of a criminal who, if it requires doing it for his own protection and power, will send you to your death, as he did with his own multiple of his own supporters on January 6th. So anybody out there voting for or considering a vote for Donald Trump, please, my friends, start having some self-respect. So that's all lined up for a briefing schedule. Jack Smith put in his motion today. He said, we were wondering if Jack Smith wanted this released public. He said yes, with the exception of those redactions. He does want a public release of key evidence. No doubt, Trump's lawyers are going to argue against this. Their reply is due just this Tuesday. And then Jack Smith gets his reply to their opposition on October 10th. So that's where it sets us right in the middle of October. Anytime after October 10th, Judge Chutkan could rule on this and release parts of this filing. Now, I love what she said earlier this week, which has been her theme throughout this case. It's unbelievable. You got Trump's lawyers defending him in a case where he literally tried to claim that in an election he lost, he had won, and steal the will of the American people. And he's now trying to run for president again to avoid criminal accountability for those crimes. And his lawyers say, please don't release anything. Don't let anything happen. You're interfering in his election run. You're interfering in his criminal impunity plan to run for election again to get out of these crimes. And of course, Judge Tanya Chutkan has zero patience for this. Thank God. And a resounding, she's like a light in the darkness where we have delayed sentencing and all other trials going off the rails. And you have Judge Tanya Chutkan in Washington, D.C., holding fast and doing everything in her power to keep justice for the American people on track. So this is what she said earlier this week when she actually granted Smith's request to file a longer brief than he had initially been permitted to. He had to go to her to get permission to file these 180 pages. And in her ruling, she said, defendants' concern with the political consequences of these proceedings does not bear on the pretrial schedule. What needs to happen before or shouldn't happen before the election is not relevant here. Thank you very much, Judge Tanya Chutkan. Now, I was thinking about, before I wrote the open, I was thinking about a theme for this week, and I didn't make it my theme in the open, but it's just a thought that I'm going to bring up with this next story that I want to highlight for you, and that's that there are so many of us out here that are trying to warn the rest of the country about what we know. I, for one, worked for Donald Trump in 2016, ignorantly and blindly, as I always say. I experienced a version of political persecution that tried to silence me for life if I had an opinion other than praising and being a sycophant of Donald Trump, that basically tried to make me like a subject in Kim Jong-un's North Korea. That is the effect that these NDAs that I battled and brought down was, to keep people in subjection for life to a so-called leader. It couldn't be further than what we believe in as Americans. And so people like me, who know firsthand, are trying to warn the rest of the country. And sometimes these stories just become blips. The one I'm going to mention, and I'll mention it right now, is that 111 former GOP officials endorsed Harris this week. Many of them worked in the Trump administration. One of them is a friend of mine, Elizabeth Newman, who was in the Department of Homeland Security under Trump. She's a devout Christian. She did vote for Trump in 2016, but realized how destructive and dangerous he is. So these stories, I mean, there have been countless stories like this over the past several weeks. Of course, we had Dick Cheney endorsing, the most unlikely of people, endorsing Kamala Harris. All of these military former officials that you would so often align with the Republican Party have come out. And just Stanley McChrystal, I think this week, wrote an op-ed in the New York Times endorsing Kamala Harris. So many people. And that we're all just begging you to listen. Listen. And I bring this up because I know there were people begging me to listen and begging millions like me to listen in 2016. And I didn't listen. And it was just like a blip. I mean, if it even came into my echo chamber at all, which oftentimes it didn't because of the sick vacuum that networks like Fox created. But if it even did, it was just a blip. And I didn't listen. Please listen. We're not against you. We're not trying to hurt you. All of these people coming out in support of Kamala Harris, they're on your side. They're trying to help you. I mean, that's what these divisive, ugly forces, Donald Trump, JD Vance, try to do. They try to say that any opposition, they just hate Trump. And they're just doing everything they can to destroy him. No, that's not what it's about. Maybe, okay, a lot of people hate Trump. I personally don't harbor animosity towards even the worst. So it's not about that for me. What it is about is loving what's good and wanting to warn other people of the danger this man poses, not only to the country, also to himself. And of course, somebody who is a liar to himself is the most dangerous to others. So just a little thought to maybe share with anybody who's on the fence or thinking this crazy construct, believing this crazy construct that I did in 2016, that Donald Trump is just under attack from everybody and everybody just, all of the opposition just hates him and wants to destroy him. Bullshit, okay? This man has victimized countless others, and the rest of us are trying to warn you. We are on your side. And if somebody could maybe have explained it to me in that way in 2016, if they could have even gotten through my filter, because I was not very transparent with everybody. I mean, I was transparent with people who I knew agreed with me, but I wasn't transparent with everybody. I gave that line that, all politicians are bad, which, as I've shared before on the show, is often a tell from Trump supporters. They will tell you everybody's bad. So I didn't even let on necessarily to the fact that I was. But maybe if you hear that tell, or if you otherwise have people that are leaning Trump or voting Trump, just share with them that we're trying to help them. We're not against them. Just a thought. I wanted to follow up on one story we did last week, which was the push from the GOP, and particularly Lindsey Graham, getting into this fight, trying to get the rules changed at the 11th hour in Nebraska so that Nebraska would be a winner-take-all state. And that effort failed, I'm very happy to report. And there's a new CNN poll out just recently that shows Vice President Harris up 11 points. 11 points in that district that is separate, has its own electoral college vote. So she's up 11 points in Nebraska's 2nd district. Just to give you some context, Biden won it by 6 points in 2020. So this is a very, very good indicator. As I explained last week, with Nebraska 2, with that district, Kamala Harris only needs to win Michigan, Pennsylvania of the swing states, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin to get to 270. A lot of other states are in play, and we don't want to let up in any of them: Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona, Nevada. But even if she only got Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, and that one district in Nebraska where she is currently up by 11 points, she would get to 270. So things are looking very good. I tell this to you not to make you think that you can take your foot off the gas for 1 second, but just to keep you inspired about how strong this campaign is and how well we're doing. So let's keep the pressure on 100% for the next 38 days. Oh, and I want to, speaking of North Carolina, I just want to put this out there. As many states have been doing, they have literally been purging their voter rolls. They have been purging their voter rolls. And they, the reasons that they give is that people have moved, or there's people that are deceased, or maybe people are now convicted felons and their states don't allow felons to vote. Whatever the reason, they are purging hundreds of thousands of people from the rolls. Most recently, we heard that North Carolina has removed nearly 1,747,000 people from the voter rolls in North Carolina. Very, very important state. Harris and Trump are tied right now in North Carolina. And you know that Donald Trump is scared to death of losing the state of North Carolina. He's been campaigning there like crazy because he knows that Harris has a real chance of winning. So I just want to remind you, as they are coming up in states across the country, early October for many states is the voter registration deadline. In North Carolina, the voter registration deadline is October 11th. If you live in North Carolina or have any friends or family in North Carolina, please check your registration. Make sure you are registered before October 11th. Goes for anyone around the state. Please check your state's voter registration. Those deadlines are coming up literally around the corner as soon as next week. And you got to make sure you're registered and get as many as people as you can registered before those deadlines hit. So let's turn to Eric Adams and this bribery case. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about Eric Adams. You'll see it nonstop on the news, and as I said, it was really, honestly, not a surprise for me. And proof that temptation to do wrong does not discriminate based on political affiliation, religion, race, gender. Temptation besets us all. And here you've got a very corrupt man who happens to identify as a Democrat. Thank God they got him. But who did they not get? This was, by the way, federal case against Eric Adams brought by the Southern District of New York for, among other things, peddling massive gifts from from Turkey. Okay. Of course, I was reminded of this situation we have with Donald Trump that was unearthed this summer by the Washington Post, where, according to their report, the DOJ in 2017 was investigating Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi's efforts to donate $10 million to Trump's 2016 campaign. And right before, here we're going to listen to Representative Raskin describe this in a minute. Right before the 2016 election, Donald Trump said that he was donating $10 million to his own campaign. And his campaign was strapped for cash and needed it. And he said he was donating his own $10 million to the campaign. And a lot of people did not really understand how he had this money on his own to donate. Well, apparently he lent it to the campaign. And then in the early days of his administration, a massive transfer of $10 million, literally almost emptying the country of Egypt, of their entire store of American currency, $10 million came to the United States from Egypt. And this came onto the radar of federal investigators in 2019, and they were trying to connect the dots between this massive withdrawal of $10 million in cash and that $10 million that Donald Trump supposedly put of his own money into his campaign. Of course, if he did that, if he took this major, major gift from a foreign donor, it would be a major violation of federal law. But of course, as I mentioned, Bill Barr, Attorney General for the United States of America, shut down this investigation into Donald Trump in 2020. In June of 2020, he claimed that there was insufficient evidence. Yeah, I guess just like the Mueller report has showed no evidence of Russian collusion or wrongdoing by Donald Trump, right, Bill Barr? So thankfully, the Democrats are pushing this matter in the House. They don't obviously have control of that body. We need to get it back in 38 days. But they're using the power that they do have to push further into investigating the situation. And I want to play this clip of Representative Jamie Raskin talking about those efforts last night with Chris Hayes.
Egyptian intelligence agents under the direction of the president went and collected $10 million. I think it was most of the American currency that was in the banking system of Egypt. And it weighed hundreds of pounds, and they put it all together in $100 bills. And then Donald Trump changed his mind. Originally, he was saying, no, he was not going to cough up the $10 million for his campaign that the campaign was asking for, despite the fact he originally promised he was going to pay for everything. But he didn't want to pay. And then suddenly he had a meeting with the president of Egypt. He changed his mind. And then that money was brought over in January, at least apparently repaying him for the money he invested in his own campaign. That money, by the way, ended up paying for an anti-Semitic TV ad that he ran featuring Lloyd Blankfein and George Soros and Janet Yellen, telling people that these globalists do not have your interests in mind.
Here's a little factoid that I'll just insert into here. If you're watching me for the first time, I see in the live chat, and it's always a pleasure. Sometimes people are like, who is this Jessica Denson? I'm watching you for the first time. And it is a knock on the media that they have not shared my story with you. And you do not know that there is a woman out there who defeated Donald Trump years ago in the courts. But as he was speaking, talking about George Soros, I was just going to take an aside here to tell you all there was a time when I was very low in my battle with Trump, actually at the time when I wanted people to know about it the most, because I wanted them to understand the threat that he poses to this country and how he was going to try to silence and make regular American citizens just disappear and destroy them. He was trying to execute an illegal $50,000 judgment that he had against me. And his lawyers, I will tell you, pretty much from day one, were so curious about where I was getting my strength. And of course, they only equate strength with money. So they thought that some big money force was behind me. And they would talk to my lawyers and say, is George Soros behind her? No, George Soros was never behind me. I never had any massive trove of money behind me. I had the real source of power, which is truth and God and principle on my side. And that's what sustained me through all of it. So anyway, little aside there on George Soros. These people their minds are like this. But there you have Jamie Raskin talking about the corruption that seems very apparent between Donald Trump and the Egyptian government, and how that was just completely shut down by Bill Barr. There is more corruption with the Trump family that is just another massive story that gets blown over way too much. And we're going to shine a bright, bright light on it right after a quick break from our sponsors. All right. So another massive Trump family scandal that we can't afford to just brush under the rug. You, of course, know that Jared Kushner, or will remember that Jared Kushner got that massive $2 billion investment from the Saudi, largely from the Saudi government, when he left office for this investment firm called Affinity Partners, him having very little experience actually, turning around any profit for investors. So it's really suspect why he would have been given so much money in the first place. Why was he given so much money? Because Donald Trump and his family just used the White House and their stint in quote unquote public service as a massive self-enrichment scheme. And Jared Kushner apparently he's really just using Affinity Partners right now to set that up to continue in a prospective second Trump term. So there is a report that came out this week that says that his firm, Affinity Partners, has reaped millions of dollars in fees in addition to that initial $2 billion investment, but so far has returned no profits to their investors. This reporting said that 99% of the firm's approximately $3 billion in funding came from overseas sources, and that they have received an additional $112 million in fees from these governments since 2021. Okay, this is what Donald Trump's family is doing. They're setting up this slush fund, this is an influence operation for their private family members to reap benefits from foreign governments when and if Donald Trump gets into office again. So we can connect the dots from Egypt to Saudi Arabia, Jared Kushner, Donald Trump. That's all this is for them. It's a massive self-enrichment scheme. And, this kind of connects us beautifully to our next story, because I don't know if any of you have watched the documentary about Lev Parnas, my friend Lev Parnas, who was very nice to finally meet in person a couple of weeks ago. And I went to the screening of that documentary from Russia with Lev, of course. And we're going to play one clip that Lev has shared just recently on social media and also in that documentary in a minute. But one thing that stood out to me so much in that documentary is how Donald Trump used the Trump Hotel. This, of course, was a massive violation of the Emoluments Clause. He was just using that hotel to rake in money for personal profit. And anybody, any foreign actor, any domestic actor, anyone who wanted to curry favor with Donald Trump when he was president knew that the ticket to doing that was by patronizing the Trump Hotel in Washington, D.C. Such a sick situation. So anyway, speaking of Lev and what he has exposed about the the extortion of Ukraine during Trump's first administration, we had this kind of like deja vu this week, where Zelenskyy is coming to the United States to try to solidify, our support for that defense that they are waging against Russian aggression against a dictator trying to infringe upon the sovereignty of a free country, just complete violation. And Trump started off this week by just leveling attack after attack against Zelenskyy. He said that Ukraine should surrender because Russia, quote, always wins wars. He called for his people at this speech he was giving to boo Zelenskyy. He said that he would lift the sanctions against Russia and Iran. And he said that the U.S., this is what, of course, he says the U.S. needs to get out of the war, and talks about making a deal, which, as I mentioned at the top, is really surrender. We're going to play the contrasting clips here in a minute. But with these attacks that he started off with early in this week, he also, this is really sick. So Zelensky's in the United States going on a tour to solidify support against, all kinds of, all of our politicians and different entities for support of his country. He goes to a munitions factory in Pennsylvania that happens to be making munitions that are being used in the war in Ukraine, and thanks them for their work and their support. As she often is, the Ukrainian ambassador to the United States was present at this event, at this munitions factory in Pennsylvania. Her name's Oksana Markarova. You probably remember seeing her. She's been highlighted during our State of the Union. She is a wonderful advocate for Ukraine here in the United States. She is the Ukrainian ambassador. What does Donald Trump get Mike Johnson to do this week? He gets him to literally write a letter demanding that Zelenskyy immediately remove Oksana Markarova from her post as ambassador. He accuses her of, this is so rich, of engaging in election interference by showing up at this facility, and saying because it happened to be in a politically contested battleground state, the state of Pennsylvania, and because apparently, and I don't even know if there's proof of this, but the language doesn't even make sense. It says the facility was in a politically contested battleground state, was led by a top political surrogate for Kamala Harris, and failed to include a single Republican, ... So the grammar of that sentence doesn't even make sense. I'm sorry, was the facility led by a top political surrogate? I don't know exactly what he's saying, but he's trying to frame a visit to a munitions factory that happens to be in a battleground state as election interference. Did somebody say projection and deflection? And, you know, you look at a figure like Mike Johnson, who we're going to talk a little bit more about in a minute, who is to me such a pathetic figure, someone who claims to be a Christian, really has no real association with the teachings of Christ, claims to be these things. And this letter, which we just had up on the screen, is this like bullying attempt. It's to try to threaten the president of Ukraine. In the end, he says, "These incidents cannot be repeated. Thank you for your prompt attention to this matter, and I trust you will take immediate action." Oh, really? Oh, really? Thankfully, the president of Ukraine, President Zelenskyy, already has experience in warding off the extortion attempts of Donald J. Trump and his puppets, and is not going to be threatened by you. So our friend Lev Parnas kind of connected the dots this week with what's going on with the Ukrainian ambassador. And I, for one, will never forget what happened with the American ambassador to Ukraine, where Donald Trump said she was going to go through some things. Which resonated way too much with me and my personal experience of what I went through. And ultimately resulted in her firing. Now, if you watch that documentary From Russia with Lev, you see how this whole concept of firing her was literally started with gossip from Lev, who admittedly, he tells, didn't even know what the hell he was talking about when he first suggested to Trump that she fire Marie Yovanovitch. Here's that clip to remind us all that Lev put out this week.
Ukraine?
Yeah. Yes. The biggest problem there, I think, is we got to get rid of the ambassador. She's still left over from the Clinton administration.
Where the ambassador, where Ukraine? Get rid of her, okay? Get her out the room. Take her out, okay?
Take her out. Donald Trump doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. Lev admittedly doesn't even know what the hell he's talking about. And that kind of, just totally off the cuff, random conversation guides U.S. foreign policy with a nation at war against a dictatorial aggressor, Vladimir Putin. I mean, this is seriously what you're dealing with. I will tell you guys, as I'm writing my book, there's the parts that I'm writing about the campaign. I'm sometimes sitting there writing, thinking, my God, this is so petty. This is so petty. And I have to step back and think like, I feel bad writing these things that just seem so frivolous and ridiculous. But that is the environment. That is the environment that this man creates. That is the environment that the sycophants and enablers around him are part of. They are part of this petty, substanceless, like almost like childish, but so dangerous treatment of what are literally world affairs. This is what you're going to do if you elect Donald Trump to president again. Literally put these clowns and just punks in charge of consequential global affairs. It is so serious. It can't happen. It cannot happen again. So I want to briefly just show the split screen between Vice President Kamala Harris's meeting with Zelenskyy this week and Donald Trump. I'm getting better at keeping Donald Trump's voice out of lights on, but we're just going to play a tiny little clip today. I know you don't like to hear much of it, and neither do I, but just going to play this tiny clip to illustrate how sick it really is. Let's start off, though, with Vice President Kamala Harris laying out the stakes as they really are.
Nothing about the end of this war can be decided without Ukraine. However, in candor, I share with you, Mr. President, there are some in my country who would instead force Ukraine to give up large parts of its sovereign territory, who would demand that Ukraine accept neutrality and would require Ukraine to forego security relationships with other nations. These proposals are the same of those of Putin. And let us be clear, they are not proposals for peace. Instead, they are proposals for surrender, which is dangerous and unacceptable.
Sure as hell is unacceptable. And that is what Donald Trump wants. So let's play the clip of Donald Trump today. Hate seeing this, hate seeing that Zelenskyy feels like he has to meet with this man who, according to the 14th Amendment of the United States, is not even eligible to be president, but we have an extra constitutional Supreme Court who allowed him to be on the ballot. But here's this clip, one of them, just going to give you a few seconds of it. Don't worry, I'm not going to torture you, of Donald Trump with Zelenskyy today.
So we have a very good relationship, and I also have a very good relationship, as you know, with President Putin. And I think if we win, I think we're going to get it resolved very quickly. I really think we're going to get it resolved.
I hope we have more good relations.
We're going to have. Oh, I see. Yeah, but you know, it takes two
to tango. He's saying, of course, he's advocating, as he always is, for concessions, for the surrender that Vice President Harris just articulated, not for actual peace based on the respect for Ukraine's borders, but for Ukraine to just concede to this dictatorial aggressor that has come in and stolen their land. So that's Donald Trump's two to tango idea. Give up to my friend Vladimir Putin. And if you listen closely, he is saying, oh, we have a great relationship. And Zelenskyy says back to him, our relationship, hopefully, like, hello, buddy, so-called person running to be leader of the free world. The relationship you have with Ukraine, hopefully, is better than the relationship you have with the dictator, Vladimir Putin. And Donald Trump responds by laughing, literally laughing at him. Oh, yeah. Oh, really? That's the interaction, one of the interactions from his meeting today with Zelenskyy and Trump. So let's turn, before we end the show today, to our friends in Springfield, Ohio. We're not going to let this story go. I remember as a journalism student, I was asked to write a piece on media bias, and there's so many that we could write. And I think I wrote it just on corporate bias at the time, which is kind of an easy choice for me. But I often think back to that assignment and thought, you know, one bias that really drives me nuts is the lack of follow-up in the media. You know, they'll tell you a story and you'll never get a follow-up. So I've been trying to follow up on a number of stories over the past few weeks, and we're going to follow up on the story of Springfield, Ohio today. Really disgusting, egregious situation, criminal situation that Donald Trump and JD Vance have created for those people in that community by their vile lies about Haitians eating pets. Somebody is doing something in Springfield, Ohio, and I want to give a major shout out to the Haitian community organization called the Haitian Bridge Alliance. They did something that you're able to do in the state of Ohio, which is bring private citizen-led charges. And they filed charges Tuesday against Donald Trump and J.D. Vance over the chaos. I mean, we've talked about it on this show, over all of the public buildings having to be closed down, the schools that have to go into remote learning, the Walmarts that are being evacuated, just the terror that the Haitian community and the community at large has been subject to by these two men. And this week, the Haitian Bridge Alliance filed charges. They brought charges for disrupting public services, making false statements, telecommunications harassment, and aggravated menacing and complicity. And the filing asks the Clark County Municipal Court, which is the county there in Springfield, Ohio, to affirm that there is probable cause and issue arrest warrants against Trump and Vance. I will stay on this story, and I hope that there is action and that the justice system there in Springfield, Ohio, takes these very valid complaints of this Haitian Bridge Alliance seriously. It absolutely is criminal what they have done, and they should be held accountable. Just when you think the low can't get any lower, they put something new out. This week we got a taste of one really egregious member of Congress. His name's Clay Higgins, and he's a representative from the state of Louisiana. And he put out a tweet this week that said, LOL, these Haitians are wild, eating pets, voodoo, spelled incorrectly, nastiest country in the Western Hemisphere, cults, slapstick gangsters, but damned if they don't feel all sophisticated now, filing charges against our president and VP. All these thugs better get their mind right and their ass out of our country before January 20th. Sicko Clay Higgins there. He's got quite a history. Was basically fired from his job at a police department or sheriff's department and then ended up running for Congress. But he deleted that tweet out of shame, being confronted by, I think a Haitian colleague in the House, and deleted the tweet out of shame. The Democrats reacted by bringing a censure vote rightfully against him. Mike Johnson, this just turd of an excuse for a man, Mike Johnson, excused him by saying he went back into the back and prayed about it and, came out and deleted the tweet. And that's what we're all about. He said, we move forward. We believe in redemption around here. Just to go back to the story of Ukraine and Lev Parnas for a minute, I wonder if they believe about redemption for somebody like Hunter Biden, who has come clean from being a drug addict and was subjected to a disgusting smear campaign led by Russia to try to bring so much pain and hurt to his family after he had also already suffered so much, and someone who's been repentant for his misdeeds. Does somebody like Hunter Biden deserve redemption, Mike Johnson? Or is it just selective? Does God just say that, if you call yourself a Republican and an evangelical, then you get redemption? Just wondering. But anyway, to get back to Clay Higgins for a second, after he deleted that tweet, he told CNN it was just free speech. And by the way, this is a quote, "It's all true. I can put up another controversial post tomorrow if you want me to. I mean, we do have freedom of speech. I'll say what I want." And he said it's nothing to him. It's something like stuck to the bottom of my boot. Just scrape it off and move on with my life. So that's who they are. That's who Mike Johnson called a good friend of his. That's really who the Republican Party is, because this is who Donald Trump is at the top of their ticket, the very one who has created all of this havoc and terror and who they fail to condemn. On the theme of, I'm glad we have time. I didn't know if we were going to have time for this, but on the theme of hypocrisy and claiming to be a Christian, claiming to believe in principles like redemption, as a Christian, I am not here to proselytize to you, but I am here to call out the sick hypocrisy and hijacking of a gospel of love and principle that has been so disgustingly claimed by people who do not adhere to the teachings of Jesus Christ in their lives. And I saw a poll. I don't even, I feel like Twitter has gotten pretty good at at the information silo algorithm. In other words, I don't usually see things unless I go looking for them that are not kind of in the liberal pro-democracy realm. But this one thing popped up on my feed from a guy named Josh Dawes. He apparently is a so-called evangelical Christian who hosts a podcast called The Great Awakening, obviously a take on awakening to criticize being woke. And his profile says Christ is Lord. Talk about that in a second. But he put out this poll that actually shows 31% of evangelicals supporting Harris, to 61% supporting Trump, and 41% of Christian churchgoers supporting Harris to 49% supporting Trump. And he said this, quote, "This data is appalling. Harris should have zero support from Christian churchgoers. This is a clear failure of pastors to equip the saints, thanks in large part to the gospel-centered crowd who gave them cover for their cowardice by convincing them it's wrong to be political." Okay. Whoa, whoa, whoa. I am appalled for a different reason when I see that poll, and that's that 61% of so-called evangelicals, who, to be an evangelical, by the way, means to preach the gospel, or 49% of churchgoers would support Trump. It's very, very disturbing to me as a Christian. So I'm appalled for a different reason. But look at this guy. Look at his hatred of people supporting a woman who in so many ways exemplifies Christ-like qualities of caring about our neighbor and uplifting one another and justice and law, against a felon who demeans everybody, who breaks laws, who doesn't repent, who is a hardened sinner. I mean, it's just so sick. It's so sick. And another friend of mine who's been on this show, I love having, and I love his perspective as a Christian Democrat. It's such an important voice to have out there right now. James Tallarico, state representative in Texas, he set the record straight in a short clip, as he often does, on who really is representing the Christ. Here you go.
Christian nationalists have taken Trump as their new Christ because he's everything the first one was not. Jesus was poor. Trump is rich. Jesus was meek. Trump is a bully. Jesus lost, and Trump is obsessed with winning. I honestly think that if Donald Trump and J.D. Vance met Jesus today, they would ridicule him as a single, childless hippie. And in fact, Donald Trump Jr. explicitly rejected Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. He said, turning the other cheek has, quote, gotten us nothing. How did we get to the point where loving your enemy is weak and loving your neighbor is woke? I mean, they are literally rejecting the central teachings of Jesus because those teachings don't serve their own self-interest. Christian nationalism is not about the way of Jesus. It's about the pursuit of power.
So thank you, as usual, to James for his clarity on that. I will, just from my understanding of Christianity, I just want to elevate one thing he said. And he said, Donald Trump, he said Jesus Christ lost. Well, in the end, what did his teachings and his understanding do? They gave him the biggest victory that this world has ever seen. So in the end, Christ Jesus was not a loser. He was the greatest winner of all time. And that's the only way you really can win, is with truth and with love. It's the only reason I won. And it's the reason that Donald Trump has lost time and time again, because he doesn't have the Christ. He doesn't have one iota of the Christ that he lives. And he is, while he may want to be a winner and claim to be a winner, he is the ultimate loser. So we've got a lot to bring into focus in these 38 days, do everything in our power. One other story I want to follow up on from last week, this very tragic, sad news and that is that Marcellus Williams, who was on death row in the state of Missouri, was executed. He's an innocent man who the prosecutors and the victim's family did not want to be executed, but the MAGA Republican governor, Governor Mike Parson, who has had a record, actually, a record of so many pardons and clemency during his term as governor, did not have it in him to pardon Marcellus Williams. And neither did the Supreme Court of the United States in a 6-3 ruling. They denied the request to stay his execution. One thing that Chris Hayes brought out this week, which is very apt, is just, quote, just how obsessed with due process and judicial review and the possibility of vindictive prosecution the conservative justices were when they granted Donald Trump sweeping immunity from criminal prosecution, and, quote, how little they seem to care when a likely innocent man is about to be executed. That's who we've got in power right now. Everything. If there's any hope of Supreme Court reform, of balancing this corrupt, insane situation we have there, it is by electing Kamala Harris and Democrats up and down the ballot. We need them in the House. We need them in the Senate. Just because we focused a light on Marcellus Williams last week and the Innocence Project, which does tireless, excellent work in trying to free innocent people who are wrongfully convicted, I want to shine a light on another man who they are fighting for the life of right now. His name is Robert Roberson. He's an autistic man who was wrongfully convicted and sentenced to death in Texas based on what has been completely debunked, this theory of shaken baby syndrome. There was not anywhere near adequate evidence to show that he murdered his child. And the prosecutor also in that case has come around and very strongly advocated for his overturning his conviction. He's currently scheduled to be executed on October 17th. I know that Governor Abbott has done a lot of things wrong, but we can still demand that he do what's right here. You can call Governor Abbott's office at 361-320-8100 and call on Governor Abbott to stop the execution of Robert Roberson, who was convicted without sufficient evidence on a debunked theory. This very kind autistic man who lost a child should not be in prison and should not be put to death. For any stories like this, always please follow the Innocence Project or go to innocenceproject.org. Their work is so, so vital. I just want to thank you all today. Before I leave you, I want to thank you for the amazing comments that you always put in my show. When I get a chance, I read them. Last week, I read some that said you are reaching out to the mainstream media and asking them to cover my story. And I want to thank you for that. They absolutely should be covering my story. And I'm doing everything in my power in the next 38 days to try to put this on the national radar, because it is a story that should be in the minds of American voters when they go to the polls, both the suffering that I endured at the hands of Donald Trump and the victory that this woman achieved and what we can achieve against this man, both at the polls and through our judicial system. The American people should know about this story. So I want to thank you all so much for being on my side and advocating for more people to know about this, as they should. As always, if you want to support those efforts, which we very much need, you can do that at thejessicadenson.com/donate. thejessicadenson.com/donate. Thank you, as always, for that very loving and beautiful support there. And if you want to follow this show and help support it, you can do that by subscribing to Lights On with Jessica Denson wherever you get your audio podcasts. And please, 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 by leaving a review there. And also, the most important, please, please subscribe to Jessica Denson on YouTube. That's really important. Subscribe to Jessica Denson on YouTube, completely free. It's where you always, even if it's not coming up in your feed on Midas Touch, you will find it in your feed on the Jessica Denson YouTube channel, because I always upload the shows there on Saturday mornings. So thank you everybody so much, as always, for joining me. We got this. 38 days. Do something. And as always, let your light shine.